Hello, my name is Richard Creath, and today I want to talk about modernism in the 20th century, architecture, design, and, well, a little more. The 20th century saw massive innovation in architecture and design, including the design of whole cities. That's town planning. We saw new materials, new structural systems, new interior spaces, new connection between the inside and outside, and, for that matter, new town planning as well. Today, we're going to briefly explore some of those changes and focus mainly on three architects and work from the late 20s to the mid-50s. I want to see what modernism is and why it matters now. The three architects in question are Frank Lloyd Wright, an American from the Midwest who eventually opened up an office and built a home in the Phoenix area, Le Corbusier, a French architect, and finally Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, a German architect who moved to Chicago in the mid-30s. We're going to look at the built environment under four headings: houses, tall buildings, parks, and town plans. Turning first to houses, Winston Churchill once said, "First we make our houses, then our houses make us." Well, there's some truth in that, but then he was born in a palace, this one, Blenheim Palace. Modern houses, or modernist houses rather, are not so grand. The first house I want to look at is Wright's Roby House, built in Chicago, 1910. It's a perfect example of his so-called prairie style from his early years. Very strong horizontal lines. There's free-flowing spaces from one room to the next. It's really quite striking, and very unlike the houses that preceded it. The typical Victorian house, also shown here, is a mishmash of styles: an Italianate roof, an onion dome, Chippendale railings, lots of gingerbread moldings, and the main thing is that the rooms are dark and hermetically sealed off from one another, each one for a special purpose. Wright aimed to break the boxes of the house, and he did that by having the spaces flow from one to the other. A second house of about 1930 was by Le Corbusier. It's in a suburb of Paris. It's a very good example of the so-called international style. That is to say, it has a flat roof, horizontal ribbon windows, white, flat exterior walls. If it looks like a machine, well, that's because Le Corbusier thought that a house was a machine for living. It may be in a park-like setting, but it is not of that park-like setting, for even the gardens and terraces are up in the house and on the roof. A third house is the Tugendhat Villa in Czechoslovakia, designed by Mies van der Rohe, 1931. It's very unprepossessing from the outside. It looks like more or less like a rundown gas station. You enter on the second floor and go down a staircase into this magnificent free-flowing interior seen here. And the house is on a hill, the top of a hill, and the back wall is floor-to-ceiling glass. And you have this magnificent view out over the city. The walls are not supporting walls, but they are rich woods and stonework. The glass wall on the back, at the touch of a button, disappears into the basement, and suddenly you're sitting on a terrace. It is truly a magnificent space. Perhaps the most famous house of the 20th century, in America at least, is Fallingwater by Wright. It was built as a weekend house outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It is built literally on top of a waterfall. Wright had not had any work to speak of for a decade, and he was thrilled to death to have this. It is a dramatic house and shows how Wright was still trying to break up the box by having the sight lines and the materials go from inside to outside, as you see on the smaller upper picture. And likewise, the corners of rooms don't even have posts there. The glass wraps around the corner, thereby breaking the box even further. Finally, here is the Farnsworth House of 1951 by Mies van der Rohe. It was also built as a weekend house. It was built for a single person, so there was no need for separate rooms. But in fact, it's a large house with completely glass walls around it. It sits in a park-like setting, and by means of the glass walls, brings the entire outside into into the living room, so to speak. It's a large house, as I said, 2,000 square feet, and it's raised up above the ground. It's absolutely weightless. Mies wanted to see how little he could get by with. That is to say, what the minimal essence of a house would be. And he gave one of the most poetic readings of glass and steel structures that's ever been given. Turning from houses to tall buildings, Mies also had a project in 1922 for a glass skyscraper in Berlin. 1922 was not a good year for building in Berlin, but here we have the essence of the glass and steel skyscraper before any had ever been built. It shows the transparency and really the model for the tall buildings of New York and elsewhere that were built later. Some buildings, however, tall buildings, were not nearly so successful. Wright's Johnson's Wax Tower in 1944 was built as a research tower. It is now used simply for storage because the floors were simply not big enough for the equipment that was needed, so it simply can't be used. Le Corbusier built what he, or designed what he called the Radiant City of 1935. This is essentially an urban renewal project for downtown Paris. It would have been a disaster had it been built. Fortunately, it was not. But he was trying to deal with a real problem. That area was a slum. It was ridden with disease, rats. The apartments had no light or sanitation for the most part. He was trying to deal with a real problem. Unfortunately, this was not the solution. Fortunately, however, it was not built in the center of Paris. Unfortunately, such buildings were built elsewhere, not only in the US, but in the suburbs of Paris, and with the predictable results. Two successful tall buildings, the Seagram Building of 1958 and the Lakeshore Drive Apartments, very similar in form. Mies had an unusual sense of proportion, and the Seagram Building may be the best office building or the most beautiful office building ever built. It's so beautiful, in fact, that New York City levies a special tax on it because it's beautiful. No wonder New York City has such lousy architecture in the whole. Turning to parks, I'm only going to talk about two parks, but this is a very tiny park in Midtown Manhattan, Paley Park of 1967. It is an oasis, a very tiny oasis of calm with a waterfall in back to mask the city noises, trees overhead. It is really a gem in the middle of New York City. Finally, on the parks, there is the brand new Highline Park, also in New York City. An unused elevated train bed was about to be demolished. And some people had the bright idea of turning that into a park. After all, trees and grasses had already begun to grow there. And this park was developed. It's several miles long, and people have thronged to it. In fact, it's brought life and people back into the city, or that part of the city, and it's caused people to build billions of dollars worth of new construction in the area, ranging from apartments to museums. Finally, I want to look at some town plans, not very many of them. Wright's Broadacre City, Frank Lloyd Wright developed the idea that we would spread the houses out. Each person would be given an acre of, each house would be given an acre of land. People would raise their own food. They would have all the cars they want, and indeed designed houses for 1 to 5 cars. There was essentially no downtown. All the schools, services, factories, so on, would be distributed out over the landscape. What you get is suburbia, and this is pretty much how Phoenix was built. Shall we say, it was not successful. The very means by which Wright thought that we would join the city, the automobile, has turned out to choke it instead. Returning then to Radiant City, sometimes called the City of Tomorrow, though I find that phrase more like Disney than serious architecture. This again is trying to deal with a real problem. And as we said before, it may deal with the problem, but it is not a successful solution. Finally, there is a book by Jeff Speck that I will ask you to read a portion of that is by a professional town planner, and he's trying to figure out what it is that makes the successful cities work. And the answer, in a word, is pedestrians. And the question then is, how can the design of cities bring back life and vitality to the neighborhoods that have been destroyed, essentially, by other means? We've seen a lot of new stuff. It's in a style that you haven't seen before, historically. But modernism is not a style. It's an idea or attitude that says, well, we're not bound by history or tradition. We're going to take our way of building, indeed our way of living, into our own hands. The idea that we've always done it in a particular way simply no longer counts as a reason for continuing to do it that way as well. We accept the highly optimistic assumption that we're up to the task. Now, of course, we're going to make mistakes. We all know in advance that some experiments will fail. But we can also learn from those mistakes and make our lives better. These modernist ideas are not confined to architecture or town planning. There were indeed parallel movements in philosophy, economics, and in social political thought. But that certainly is a story for another day. You can find these, where these photographs have been taken in the accompanying material. And what I'd like you to do before the class period is to look at that accompanying material, where you'll find videos and readings and questions to keep in mind while you're going through that material. Above all, have fun. You're up to the task.